Just to remind you guys, opening map, Dry Arabia. Choices are going to be Team 2 have chosen Rus, France, and Mongols. This is pretty standardized. A lot of teams have been doing this in Dry Arabia, and their opponents have actually curveballed it. They've gone for France, China, and England, and I'm not fully sold by this from Team 1, but you know what? Let's switch across the view so you guys can see what I'm talking about. It's better that way. So yeah, you can see from these choices, it's very different to what I'm used to seeing. As you can see on the left, BC and Bros, that is going to be DeMusliM, RecoN, and Beastyqt. And the other team are called Dango Daikazoku. Hopefully I haven't fully butchered that. These guys are not the highest rank from what I can recall seeing. So we had Spacer Z, which was no rank. So I don't even know if that was their main account. BloodyEvee, I think, was registered, but only on the 3v3 leaderboards. And Safer also doesn't come up in 1v1s. It's kind of a funky situation. It might be that we get a lot of players. Yeah, so Safer, if you look at the 3v3s, he's actually the top 4,000 in the world. BloodyEvee, I think, has been playing a decent amount, and he was sitting in the top 6K. And then rounding out, Spacer is currently 687. So he's the golden star here, right? He's the one to watch. And this is kind of interesting to think about because it means that what we're probably going to have is, I think the centralized player is probably going to be Spacer, and he's going to look to boom up with France. We'll see if that is the case when we hop in this. So Spacer is in the red. No, he's... Wait, what is this generation? What? They are very close, right? They are incredibly close right now. So RecoN and Spacer are basically close to kissing distance as far as enemies go. This feels more like it's a 2v2v2 generation than a 3v3. Usually there's a split divide, right? You can kind of draw a line halfway down the map, and one team's on the left and one team's on the right. Instead, you've got these weird pocket situations. Apart from Beastie, who's just playing pat cake with himself at the back of the map. He essentially just got like a third for himself. Everyone else, though, is fairly condensed. This is going to be interesting to see. It might make it very hard to exploit the static element of these two civs to the south, right? So the thing to keep in mind for Dango here is they could suffer from China and England building static type units, right? And maybe not going cav, especially England. But if they're the ones being attacked, it means they're going to have an easy response force close by, even if you're going static as China. The one worry for me is how far out Spacer is. And he's going for the cavalry, right? He should be going into French Knights. That's usually what we see out of the Civ. But that means that if there's a push in, right? If for example, the backup comes in from Beastie with, say, a raiding force, you might be exposed on the front while you're away from home trying to raid. I think you have to address this in the north. It's an exploitable element because RecoN's on the front. My concern is if they do buffer you away, DeMusliM is going to run rampant in this game around 12 minutes. Because remember, when we look at these civs, we talked about the standardized choice here, right? Especially on Dry Arabia. These high-level players have regularly been going for a combination of France, Mongols, and the Rus. The Rus being able to quickly castle boom up, they're the greed factor, right? But their greed is quite confined. It's not ridiculous like, say, a Chinese player who's TC booming up to like 5 town centers, right? It's designed to come online around the 12-minute mark and instantly get involved in the fights with horse archers, right? And that could be supported very easily by some easy diversification out of Mongols, right? You can either go for a static force very early on archers and spearmen, which you can afford very cost-effective early on due to the Uvu, or you can try to dial into your own castle-aged timing later with a step redoubt and then spamming lancers, which gives you a front line that supports the French knights, right? And the whole concept there is you're mobile. You have 3 mobile elements, lancers, knights, and horse archers. Meanwhile, on the other side, this choice is a bit more curveball-y. I have seen England be quite effective in 3v3s as kind of your foothold in feudal, right? Designed to early pressure. But usually you back that up with like a cavalry civ and a rapid boomer. So I'd say something more along the lines of like England, Rus, and France, right? Or maybe you think England, Mongols, and France. And then France is your centralized player. They get Royal Knights and run through. Instead, you've got China. China in this matchup could be somewhat interesting due to the potential for fire lancers. I think they're going to look to enable him to boom up. And where this could get very interesting is if you're talking about 3 civs on the other side that want to build only cavalry, where's going to be the siege weapons coming from? Like, what's your counter going to be to massed fire lancers? It could get very scary very quickly. But it all comes down to if he chooses to ultra greed and if he's covered against it. Because like I said, he is up against 3 cavalry type civs and they will move across the map quickly. And my concern is right now, what is your strong arm defense here, right? The French player is going to be pressured, so his economy might suffer. He might not have the active raiding ability. And then in the south, Lombos are slow regardless. And it's the only build available to England. It's the only play. It's the only reason you pick this Civ, right? If you're building anything but Lombos, even in a 3-on-3 as England, I have a big question mark over why you picked it in the first place. And if all you've got for me is England, oi, 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 then you probably should just surrender right now. And that's coming from an Englishman. Look at this attempt by RecoN, though. Oh my god, this is actually so smart. So he has a safe gold line. Instead, he's punishing his opponent, his mirror, right? The other French player from being here. And if he does secure this, if he does get this down, he'll have control of 2 gold veins. And that's why Spacer pushes out with the villagers. And he gets in a shiv match at this early point. And after all that, Safer is going to be the first one to tech up. So the English player does make it up. Followed up quickly, as we will have a second person joining it. It's going to be DeMusliM. So DeMusliM, the other player in the south, both of them just away, farming to their heart's content. These guys are being slowed in the north, though, right? Because they had to aggress like that. But look at the edge. RecoN, this is smart. He's going to drop the score cavalry quicker than his opponent because he forced him to aggress onto him right here. But it's going to be too late to exploit because the outpost is already going down from space. A really smart play there. If he didn't drop the outpost, he would have been in a lot of trouble in the next minute, right? Because the knight would have came out. He would have secured this area long enough to get an outpost out. And then when we look at the gold situation, you have no other gold. So it was critical that Space had done this. Really well identified by him. But cool play by RecoN nonetheless. If that works, you are like increasing your win probability by 10% off the back of that one play. Because France without gold in the early mid-game is... I mean, it's not France. It's more like a 2-year-old trying to spell France with crayons and just spelling Frudens. That's the best I've got for you guys. Because I've never seen a game where England... Well, I think I've had one situation, where France has been that starved out. And it wasn't pretty. Your only option was archers. And you'd be building archers up against France sitting right next to you, which would never end well. So, good thing he's able to cover that. We'll be able to get in the gold. This, of course, doesn't hurt RecoN losing access to this gold vein. He has another one over here. He also has one back up here. But there will be contesting going on between these two players if this game starts to go later, right? Because all their gold is stacked towards the center. You can retreat towards the back if you are RecoN in this, not RecoN, sorry, if you are Spacer in this situation. But optimally, you want to be pushing the front, right? You want to be moving towards your opponent, denying them ground and denying them valuable resources. Meanwhile, Pro Scouts has been researched by DeMusliM, as expected. But look at this. Okay, this is cool. So, this is a really smart play. Beastie could go ahead and get a stable and get double value and get Pro Scouts, but that's a lot of resources, right? That's 150 wood. Then, that's 60 food and 60 stone on the Scouts. And then the Pro Scouts, of course, cost 75 wood and 275 gold. Instead, look what's happening here. DeMusliM, because he says, I'm not going to be active early on, I'm going to be tech booming up, I'm going to enable you. So here's an influx of food, despite the fact you don't have Pro Scouts, because I produce a lot of Scouts, and I want to steal everything away on the map, and I just want to be greedy. You, in the meantime, use this food to push out archers, and he's able to afford the Magadai because of it. Otherwise, Magadai is not feasible here, because it's the fact that you waste wood, which you need to shift people across from food and gold to, get that wood, right, to build these stables. And then also, you need to get the Pro Scouts. Otherwise, you can't afford these Magadai. Because remember, they're very pricey, 120 food and 40 gold. And this is what had me excited about the 3v3s, guys. It's this type of layering, right? This complementary element. And it's very easy to trip yourself up when you have Rus and Mongols on the same team. I've seen a lot of teams where both players get Pro Scouts, and it looks terrible. Because your early economy is sunk in a weird way. Instead, this is how you optimize. There's other cool elements to think about as this tournament goes on. Imagine, for example, an HRE player with a Rus player. Rus player can collect aggressive relics, drop them at the HRE's Regnitz Cathedral, bank easy, and then boom with the HRE. These are the type of things that I look forward to. And it's why I'm excited, because coming from a person who played a lot of Dawn of War as a kid, I know that Relic had loads of layerings there, that you had all kinds of cool synergies that would come out. And you can kind of see that coming into Age of Empires 4, that this game was made by the Relic devs. It has that same feeling that when you introduce team play, that's where this game can truly shine. Here you go, Magadai already out. Magadai really frustrating for Spacer here. Spacer, we said he was going to be alone. This was a concern. And you can see Horseman now being built by BloodyEvee. The problem is that it's going to take him ages to reinforce this, and if there's Knights ever here, he's going to be counted out. But Beastie needs to be careful. Has got the maneuver arrow to get him away from this, and will run for the high hills. And is grouping up more Magadai. Meanwhile, in the south, my concern is the Lombo attempt isn't that good from Safer. He wasn't able to breach here. He forced the Wooden Fortress, and look at this. DeMuslim's already up in the Castle Age, and all of a sudden the Longbowman's invalid. Yes, you have the initial range, but the cost effectivity isn't there, right? Your Longbowmen aren't as tanky as the Horse Archers. The Horse Archers do more damage than you, right? You're now out-teched, and also going to be easily outmatched. 80 food, 40 wood cost compared to the 40 food, 50 wood cost. To gain the additional damage and range is totally worth it here. I think the mobility is going to be the most important factor. Because now Safer has a hard choice. Do I go north and assist where the main battle is going to be? Or do I try and shut down DeMuslim before he engages? Because if you both head for the north, DeMuslim will always arrive sooner because of that mobility factor. Especially when you consider Longbowmen as one of the slowest units in the game at 1.12 tiles per second. There you go, forced off the food. Oh my, whoa, what? Oh my god. Space up, the amount of villages he just lost. 17 villages right now. RecoN, in the meantime, up at 36. He's doubled him up off the back of that. Where is the assistance? No assistance, just greed. This was my concern. Your French player is exposed, and the cavalry, the mobility is what is making the difference here on Dry Arabia. So much ground to cover and too much ground. The Longbows are on their way, but look how far away they are. Not only that, you have 4 spearmen coming up. You'll lose the Longbow if you show them right now. And here it comes. He's backing up for the moment. They're moving across this way. Remember, the Magadai do not do well against the Longbow due to the double range difference. They have to get so close. But with the Knights to back them up, how do you counter this? Magadai move in. Bait the spears out. The spears get baited on the 1 or 2 Knights, and the wraparound coming in. He tries to turn around, but the attack rate coming out from the Magadai is going to wipe this army quickly. He tries to stick on top of him with the Horsemen, but BC quickly moving away, cutting him out. There's just not enough Horsemen here. The Longbows are in trouble as well. Knights will back off for the moment. They say, nah, the Longbows are out in the middle of the field. England's static. Deal with the rest of this. Get rid of the mobility, and then we'll dial back and deal with the remaining forces. And Spacer finally trying to get involved, but look at this, the Stealth Forest. Are they going to play it? No, they go deeper. They're looking for high priority targets. They want to sink everyone else's economy too. Maganite will scare off the Red Knights again. And these spearmen, they trickle in. This is the other issue. No fort base means you're running across this open field, being picked apart by a superior force in terms of mobility. And right now, Safer, he looks on enviously and says, why can't I have a horse? Well, because Longbows being fired off of horseback is not exactly that feasible, my friend, outside of playing Mountain Blade. And these lads are mounted with big blades. Straight in. Safer stands his ground, but that's going to be all for naught. This game is looking close to done as well. It sounds like an exaggeration, but where's your comeback? Your England player, he's sacrificing his timing. He's staying in feudal to try and cover your early mid-game, but it's not working. In the meantime, BC's made up the castle alongside DeMusliM. RecoN isn't there yet, but he's applying enough pressure. He's setting the tempo, and he's always outnumbering his French counterpart on the other side. Meanwhile, the boomer in the center, BloodyEvee, is not booming at all. He built 1 TC. He is not up at castle, and he's being forced to push out as many units as possible. He's even switching into the spearman now. And my concern with this is that Magadai counter out everything you're doing right now, because the longbow count isn't there. And if you don't have longbows, the Magadai will rule this alongside the horse archers that now come into play. DeMusliM riding in with a fleet of horse archers. And now it's China's turn. They say, okay, we've struck red, we've struck yellow. Let's complete the rainbow, boys. In we go. Team Blue, where you at? And there are too many villagers here. And you have to be a bit scared. He'll back up for the moment. The problem is the horse archers in position. They're going to move in. They'll start to pick apart the horsemen, these measly horsemen that aren't even upgrading to vet status because you're still stuck in feudal. And the panic, all the villagers trying to run for protection, but there's not enough room for all of them. Imperial official also gets sniped out. Army's dead. Stuff's going to start getting raised to the ground. There's nowhere for them to run and hide. In the meantime, in the north, look what space has been reduced to. He doesn't have the economy anymore. That early dent into his eco count, basically halving his villager count compared to his counterpart in the purple, meant that he can't afford knights anymore. He can only afford horsemen. And horsemen do nothing in this matchup now because there's too many knights in the field. And there you go, moving in. Horse archers on top of the longbows. Scouts join in as well. And this game looks all but done. Really well played coming out from BC and Bros. I mean, honestly, really cool play out of the north here. We said this was going to be the central contention point, and it definitely ended up being that way, right? This early attempt by the outpost was really cute out of RecoN, but he doesn't double down on it. He doesn't get greedy. Instead, the other play which matters is what DeMusliM is doing in the south. He's gathering up those carcasses. He drops them off for Beasty, and Beasty quickly identifies that the composition they need to run here is all cavalry. So what does he do? He doubles down on Magadai. Magadai usually can't afford, but are able to do so due to DeMusliM's selflessness here, which then also enables him to be selfish with a tech up in the castle and will give them game 1 here on Dry Arabia. Oh, they spent no time waiting around. This is what I was kind of expecting. Dry Arabia is all about maximum exploitation. You don't want to drag late game. A lot of people have this misconception about how exactly 3v3 should play out, right? They think there's going to be long, tedious, there's just going to be Imperial Age everywhere. No. Open maps like Dry Arabia, most definitely not. Rarely ever, in fact, because the whole concept is you want to mass quickly as free and eliminate one player. Once one player is gone, most teams will fold out. There are rare exceptions we've seen where someone can come back 2 versus 3, but that requires an insane amount of greed to be taking place and a lot of distractions to be occurring. They don't have the composition for that. Their French player could be an eco boomer. He could be very powerful in the later phases. He's on the front. He's already been sacrificed. England was the one you would want there. If any of your free civs was to be sacrificed at the beginning like that, it would be England, because they could still get out some longbowmen, they could still run tempo control for the first 10-15 minutes, and then you have a bounce back of like France and China. And if China's booming enough, Fire Lancers can run this game through. The problem is that never comes online. The eco boom is incredibly slow and almost non-existent out of China. And this is an exploitive factor of the civ compositions, right? We said Rus, it's greedy, but it's greedy for a very small amount of time. And also, he gets away with that greed further because of that aforementioned enabling he gives to Beasty, right? Meanwhile, China's not enabling anything. He's not going pro scouts. He's not delivering carcasses to his teammates. He's not going free for TC, so he's quickly online. He's not pushing out some sort of counter unit that really changes the course of the game. And also, his only option to counter right there is Horseman at that stage, because he's in feudal, and also it's too big of a map to run spearmen across. So there's really no play at that stage. I think it's an outdraft coming out, really well played by Beasty and Bros to achieve that. But more importantly, beyond that, I think it's just a miscoordination. It is unfortunate the way that generated, but remember that you can choose which one of your players is in the center of the formation based on where you slot them in the lobby. So they actually chose to put China there. They understood what they were doing. The gamble was on the other two, and that gamble does not pay off for them. RecoN is able to win the mirror matchup in the north, and England stuck up against the Rus. You have no way to pressure on your own, and that secures an easy win at about the 14-minute mark here to open up this series. But remember, guys, this is the best of 3. So, short break, and then game number 2 will take place. And game number 2, this is where there's maybe a bounce back. This is where they can get their stuff together. Remember, the losing team does get to choose every time they lose. So maybe Dango can have a bounce back. And remember, that powerful combo that they just ran is not available to Beasty and Bros anymore. They have to mix it up. So they can't pick France, they can't pick Mongols, and they cannot pick Rus. I'm excited to see what they're going to deliver, though, in game number 2 in just a few minutes' time. And we're back with more of DeMusliM, Beasty, and RecoN. Game number 1 looked pretty smooth for them, all right? Smooth like butter. But game number 2, maybe it's a different story. Remember, the way this works, you cannot have the same civs you had in game 1. So now we begin to throw those curveballs, and we see where they land as we get into game number 2 of this best of 3 between DeMusliM, Beasty, RecoN, and then on the other side, we're going to have Spacers, Saferer, and rounding it out will be BloodyEvee. Or if you would like to know them by their names, of course, I do refer to Beasty as Beasty and the Bros. Their official name, I think, was Beasty and the STRAELBORAAAAS. That was too long for me to type in there. What do you want me to do? Edit more things? Screw that. On the other side, though, is Dango Daikazoku. These guys were dismantled in game 1. It didn't even look remotely close. They got a little bit greedy, and then they got exploited to the maximum. But this time around, things are changing. The problem is they have to change on both sides. So if you use some of your best civs in the first game, you're going to be punished in the second as well. And here on Hill and Dale, it's all going to be about that greed. Look at these civ matchups. HRE on both sides, and then all of this switch up the other way around. So this time around, because they didn't use Mongols last time, they're going to actually be manning it on the Dango side. So Dango's going to be manning Saferer with the Mongols, and then they also do have the Abbases. Now, we mentioned the Abbases as a fantastic civ to whip out in 3v3s as a tempo civ for the feudal age. This civ is actually incredible at buying you time in feudal and then boosting up into castle and ramping into siege, right? So it has a specialist role. So expect BloodyEvee to look to be the pressure early on, while his teammates are a bit more greedy, which makes sense with HRE, and also Mongols have the ability to scale up into castle quickly. Once they're there, that's when BloodyEvee, while being in position midway across the map with an army of spearmen, will look to just start building up siege weapons to be supported by probably knights and either Magadai or lancers from his teammates. Meanwhile, on the Beastyqt Bros side, we've got a switch up as well. We're going to get Delhi. Delhi on a non-water map. Say it isn't so. Well, it's not a water map, but it is a choke point-based map. And it also is a cool concept here in Hill and Dale. Being supported by an HRE player and a China player, you have plenty of means to bolster up, right? They've gone all greed. But the problem of going all greed in a 3-on-3 is if you're forced to stay on your high ground, 3 players sap through your initial resources very quickly. And that's where Delhi is kind of a cool one, because RecoN is the cost-efficient element to this strategy, right? He's going to have the ability to research a lot of late-game techs without any impeding cost to them, right? Think about the savings at that point in the game. And think about how easy it is to reach Imperial Age in this type of game because you're on a choke point-based map, right? This isn't your Dry Arabia where cavalry reigns supreme. This is actually a turtle-up type style map. In fact, it's even feasible to look at wonder victories. I know it sounds insane to say, but in these team games, we see them quite frequently attempted. And usually, Hill and Dale is top tier in that list. Usually, the generation is actually the players are all along one side, but this one went for a more interesting twist with the side-to-side, right? Which is fun. I think it gives a little bit more flex. It makes it maybe a little bit easier to breach and punish people for a wonder victory compared to the line formation on Hill and Dale. But the cool thing that I was talking about with this tech, though, if you wonder how much you save, think about late game, where you're forced to make a transition. Not only do you have to tech up, but also it costs you 1,000 resources for each upgrade in Imperial Standard, right? When you're playing as the Delhi, you probably already have a few of these moss down. They're garrison full of these scholars. They research very fast, and they do it for free. And that's where you're going to see a lot of value for RecoN in that late game situation. Because he's just going to free up extra resources on this high ground for his teammates so they can prep for a push out in that mid-late game scenario. I also think there's a lot of flexibility for Beastyqt Bros to actually get 2 players to Imperial Age quickly. Abbasids are going to be a bit slower. The HRE has the same standard, but Mongols tend to lag around in the Castle Age. Even in these team games, they tend to hang around a lot longer. I don't think that, for me, Mongols don't get as big of a booster in going to Imperial as most civs. I think their power time is in Castle, right? In Castle, where you want to actually start dropping these outposts and pushing in and causing a siege scenario, right? Or kerfuffle where you're building of siege weapons in the field and your additional movement speed. My only issue in this type of game is, like, usually the way that Mongols get utilized in 3v3s is it's all about that power spike timing at like 10, 15 minutes, right? We saw Magadai utilized. You can push into Lancers later. It's the start of Castle. That's where you bloom, and that's where you start to strike in. Problem is that option isn't available to you on Hill and Dale. You're going to be forced later, and if we're forcing an ultra late game situation, as everyone and their mum goes to Feudal Age, thank you, I do just favor the composition for Team 2. Being Beastyqt Bros, right? Because China in the ultra late game, we start to talk about the Yuan dynasty, so everything gets juiced on the movement speed. They scale up well into multiple TCs to get there if they need to. We also start talking a bit about things like Fire Lancers. Fire Lancers up against civs that typically build clusters, especially the Abbasids that might be exposed if they go hard into infantry, which is usually the composition for Abbasids. And then also, keep in mind that the HRE is always going to reach Imperial quite comfortably. They're very strong there with their super economy. And the Delhi in the late game situation, on these choke points, buying enough time, pushing out with War Elephants, well, then we reach the most important question of all. Who's countering Delhi? Because I don't think they're countered in this game at all. So, bracing doesn't matter as much up against elephants compared to cavalry, so we're going to ignore the detail that HRE spears don't brace. But looking at the other guys, I think the one kind of Vavavoom can be BloodyEvee with his spearmen. And in a one-on-one, I actually quite like Abbasids in late game against Delhi because with the Phalanx technology, you get double the amount of spears stabbing into each elephant. My only issue, excuse me, in this game is it's a 3-on-3 and there's China on the other side. And if he builds a line of STBs, your spearmen disappear, dude. You're gonna have pictures of your spearmen you once had on the side of cartons and milk cartons trying to find where they went, right? They're going to be 4-0-4'd out of the game, and that's scary to me. The other element that can be powerful against the elephants is this lad right here. If Safer builds an outpost network and juices up his movement speed via the YAM speed from the outposts, you can run down the elephants really fast. Even if there's like 20 elephants there, phenomenal number to think about, but imagine we get to that stage, you gap close so quickly, you can actually do a lot of damage without losing too many spears. But I think the biggest issue I see overall is even if you both build the spears, even if you counter it, even if we take this element out of the equation that we're talking about with the nested bees, my issue is reinforcement rates. I think if you want to beat the Delhi on this map and this style, and he goes hard into elephants, and we get like everyone being 200 pop capped, you start talking about unit efficiency, like life efficiency, right? And what I mean by that is that each of these individual units, although they're quick to replace, they take ages to push out because they're going to be infantry-based, what we're talking about for the counters to elephants. And also, if your opponent gets capped as well as an LE spammer, and he has like 5 buildings waiting to push out new elephants, they just return in the blink of an eye. And they take about the same time to reinforce. So that's where I think when you talk about these two maps, you have two choices. You either build a hard cavalry composition and you push in hard and fast, or you send yourself around this area, right, in the center of the map, and you drop a forward base from which you can actually run quick raids into your opponent's economies, right? Or siege them quickly with like these static units such as spearmen, man-at-arms, the archers and such. I think the only civ that can't brace still is the HRE. If someone knows for sure if that's not the case, just update me on that. I did see some funky stuff with Delhi gameplay recently. I don't know if it's slightly bugged, but it looked like they couldn't brace either. It was really kind of messy, actually. It came up in a recent series, in the Winter Series, where I believe Lucifron wasn't able to brace against Knights by the look of it from France, and it completely decimated the game. Hopefully they fix that soon. It's such a gaping issue that I don't even know how it exists still. It's really frustrating to see because I want this game to succeed, but it's very hard to even get into details about horse archers are strong, or this is strong, or this is weak, when you've got issues such as, I don't know, basic things such as mechanics like bracing not working, which is a critical detail when you're versus cavalry. Oh, look at this though. DeMusliM, he gets sniped twice. Really good move by Safer, and look what this is covering. So they're going in early. I like this play. This is the power of the Abbasids, right? Remember, Abbasids, they get access to the siege technology straight away. They don't have to get siege engineering at all. They can build these in the Dark Age. He didn't even need to tech up necessarily. But obviously chooses to do so because you don't want to rebuild spearmen and run them across map only to be countered by archers. But now look at the counters coming out. Double stable drop. Horsemen now being built by RecoN. Now remember, he also did get his hands on the military efficiency, so he can bank scholars in this to make these horsemen churn out real quick. And I would expect similar in the north. Beasty has already expanded to a secondary TC, has got the stable down, is overseeing production out of it, so he can spam horsemen as well. And that counts most of what's coming out. The one issue right now is if the HRE player catches up, but look how far behind he is. We didn't even get a chance to talk about this. Spacer, he went all in as well. They've given themselves no wiggle room at all in this series. If this backfires at any point, they're likely to lose this. DeMusliM's already up in castle, and although he only has one relic banked, he has knights, he has the quality. Where are the spearmen? And if you're relying on your HRE player to build the spearmen, why? Why would you ever do that? Oh my god, they are as well. Okay, this is about to get bad. Ram moving in. They're buying some time. Magadai raiding in. You can afford to lose some of this economy. Remember, you're 40% more efficient than other civs, so as long as you don't lose half your economy, you're going to be fine here. Knights will be kited out by the Magadai. But he's just buying time. Reinforcements are coming soon. Here are the horsemen. They're starting to stack up. TC dropped here as well. This is really cool. So what's happening here is Dango, they're identifying the HRE player in the center as greed, right? They want to eliminate DeMusliM because he first teched up and he looks weak. So they're all in on him. In the meantime, to the north and the south, both the other players on the Beasty and Bros team are actually building up their economy. They're scaling with multi-T seats, which means if they hold in the center, they're going to be superior on the sides, and then they can push out with superior economy against a team that is full all-in on Feudal Age. And right now, look at this. This is working. The counter's coming out. RecoN chasing down. We'll get rid of most of the Magadai here. Meanwhile, in the base, the Rams are going to be a fat fail, and they're being repelled away. Safer trying to bring in more troops in the meantime. The Magadai slowly slogging out. And we said about this issue, right? When you go for all-in strats, this is the weakness. It takes 1,001 years to cross the map if you're not cavalry. And that's what it's experiencing. Archers and these spearmen. I don't like this, by the way. Why is this not the other way around? If anyone should be building spearmen, it's Evie. Evie who gets the phalanx, so he gets the additional range on the spears. And then also, remember, with the HRE superior economy, they can support a crap ton of archers in the early game. He could easily actually support archers and spearmen in this situation as the HRE. Especially considering you're not going up to castle, you're fully invested. I just don't like this play. This composition isn't going to work at this rate. And Beasty, he's already counted this as well. Look, everything coming other than man-at-arms. Man-at-arms at this stage, which are pretty underwhelming, the early status. The Jugunu kill everything. So now, in a choke point, you have to somehow get past this slow-moving glass cannon that just wipes you off the face of the earth. Good luck. DeMusliM riding out with the Knights. He's going to cause chaos here. And he goes, Yugnu getting range. Now, although you have resistance, it's not as hard as it usually is. So you still take decent damage as the man-at-arms here against the Yugnu. And you can see the damage being done. And these man-at-arms aren't cheap, remember. They cost 100 food and 20 gold each. That is a huge sink out of your economy, even as the HRE at this stage of the game. And he holds well. That was your strategy. That was your plan. That was everything. And without any sort of forefront, without any way of actually getting a foothold in the base again, now it's going to start to swing the other way hard. DeMusliM is riding out. He's slamming them all down. These are Knights versus Hardened Spearmen. They are underwhelming. Like we said, they do not brace. And the brace is important, remember. The brace allows you to initially stun, which gets another hit in while stopping your opponent attacking, and then root them for an additional second afterwards, which stops them from disengaging. Instead, DeMusliM is just running rampant here. And the damage out of the Magadai is negligible. It's 5 range resistance, 3 damage being done per hit onto you with 230 health on these Knights. They're finding value. And they're finding ground as well. And now you need scale. Safer has done exactly that. It's the Mongol player that goes up first in the step readout, up into the Castle Age. Meanwhile, it's going to be a TC expansion from Spacer. Still no intent to tech up. Despite the ridiculous amount of gold he has, he's not looking to spend it. This is suboptimal. You're not utilizing your economy correctly, and he needs to fix it. He's finally dropping the marketplace to do so. Maybe he gets access to a tech up soon, but you're going to be so far behind your counterpart on the other side. DeMusliM is comfortable in this age now. 2 relics banked, although it's not optimal, is good enough. You're able to scale. You're able to afford up to 4 stables, and right now he's being safe with just 3. Meanwhile, in the south, more blacksmith being dropped. Remember, guys, when you're playing as... Oh, only 1 blacksmith. Okay. You want more blacksmiths when you're playing... Okay, yeah, sorry, I'm blind. It is 2. So when you're playing as the Delhi, you want multi-blacksmiths because, remember, the research is free, right? So it's worth it to pay 150 wood to get access to these researchers twice as quickly. And also, it's going to set him up good timing to transition to man-at-arms if he wants. Delhi are so underrated with man-at-arms. Everyone seems to forget about Force March's existence. It's a fantastic skill. And could easily come into play at this rate. Like, you're already starting to get a foothold. DeMusliM has pushed single-handedly, by the way. He's pushed them from the center of the map all the way back to their base. And that's covering these timings now. So RecoN teched up into Imperial. I would expect to see Beasty cracking it in just a few moments as well. In fact, yeah, he's already underway. Astronomical Clock Tower being built. 2 TCs for him. On the other side, it's still 1 TC. 1 TC for the Abbasid player. This is hurting them too much. They need to get the Abbasid player up. They need to actually have that siege crew. If they can start moving out in the field and building siege weapons on the go, it'll be good. But instead, look what's happening. The snipe out's coming in. Villagers dying. And BloodyEvee, 43 economy. Let's look on the other side. 2 TCs has put Beastyqt up at 90 right now. With another tech up complete, all of Beasty and Bros are up in Castle Age. Meanwhile, only 1 member of Dango is sitting in Castle. They are just being outscaled. Lance is now coming out. This is going to buffer you for about 3 or 4 more minutes because remember, that gold influx will allow you to push out the initial line of Lances. The problem is, with all that passive gold that DeMusliM is generating, as well as his more efficient economy, courtesy of the 40% gather rate increases in capacity with the Holy Inspiration and the ridiculous farmlands here, it means that he's going to match exactly what you're doing on the Lancer front. Maybe even exceed you because he can always afford it, right? He's going to be able to afford the food and the gold. Whereas Safer, he's going to start to struggle on one of those fronts. You can see if you break it down right now, he's barely got anyone working on gold because he's got too much. So he's switched them over to food, and look how he's suffering. This is where he's lagging behind. And this switch over to pastures isn't cheap. You need loads of people on wood, which means there's this rippling effect of I need this, but I also need this, and this costs this to build this. So it all layers itself, right? To fix the end issue of food, you have to go through all these meticulous steps. To fix the cost of lances, you have to take 3 different bounces, whereas DeMusliM only took 2. Gather relics, build farms. And although usually that would cost you wood, you don't really spend as much on the wood infrastructure early on compared to what Safer is doing because he's paying double, well not, like, yeah, double for the pastures, right, compared to the farms. And that's hurting him a lot here. Safer trying to secure over here, but look at the move in. RecoN, he goes hard in the scouts. And in the middle of a tech up. Oh no, Spacer. This might just screw the poodle. There's no way for him to deal with this. He needs to get people finishing this right now, but to what end? What do you do with this once it's teched up? You don't have surplus economy right now. Everyone retreats towards the TCs. They hide their head between their knees and they shake back and forth in the corner and say, please, Daddy Beastie, leave. But he's not going anywhere. Ver and Yugnu are just going to overwhelm you. Even the Lancers do not last long against this quantity. He's reached critical mass. All the while, BloodyEvee trying to hold back the Knights, but those Knights will run you through. You needed the Lancers to counter that out, if anything. A lot of these Yugnu are going to fall, but the battering ram is now in under the Regnitz Cathedral. Most of your front line is gone, which means your Magadai are going to quickly die to these Yugnu. They have to back up before that happens. And only a few crossbowmen coming out from Safer. It's too slow. More Yugnu coming in. There's Yugnu that do counter out the crossbow, remember, as they have no range resistance, and these units shooting bursts of smaller damage that adds up against low armor units. Low armor units like the Archers, for example. The Archers are about to experience pain. Good God. Meanwhile, on the base, Regnitz Cathedral does get completed. Spacer finally commits to it. But what's it going to cost him? The Yugnu, if you chase him in the back, what? Beasty's backing off. He could have sniped all these villagers here. He shows a lot of respect. In the meantime, getting more of a foothold here. Economy is scaled a little, so BloodyEve's able to afford more military bonus, right? It's just going to be spears, though. And this is my problem. Why was this not the first move? This should have been happening before. BC, in the meantime, by the way, has gone up to Imperial Age. And I think he hasn't gone for... No. So he hasn't switched out. He just wants Yugnu. He's prepped at any point to switch to Fire Lancers. Fire Lancers will end this game. And in the meantime, look at this. All of the points have been capped. RecoN moved out. He shifted onto these sacred sites and prioritized that. So now they've started the timer. And you are already up against the ropes. In fact, let's just enable that timer. So here you go. 10 minutes to make a move. And how do you make a move when you're stuck in your own base like this? That's the better question. Can you make a move? Nope. They surrender. They give it over. BloodyEvee taps out, and I'm not surprised. His economy is non-existent at that stage. Every single villager is just down in the muck apart from this gold line. And with the elephant showing up, that was the final nail in the coffin. As soon as they saw RecoN was actually participating with more than just scouts, there was no way back in. Safer might stubbornly try to hold on, but it's done. And one way to do it, this was so smart coming out from Beasty and Bros. They prioritize all attention on DeMusliM. They fake back it. They drag all of the eyes onto him by making him go castle as quickly as possible. And then, with all that attention there, it allows this greed on the outskirts, right? They wall up on the north, on the south. They leave this opening in the center pass, and they allow their opponents to funnel in towards their death. In the meantime, they're building up TCs. They're scaling their economy. They're going to arrive in castle later, and they actually can last long enough against a slow-moving army of spearmen and archers that not only will they not have to worry about DeMusliM being wiped, but they'll also have enough time to get an initial counterforce out of Yugnu and Horsemen. So well played coming out of these guys, and they are looking lethal, right? You just saw exactly how Hill and Dale changes the game completely. When we're talking about Dry Arabia, Lipany, these type of maps, just plow on in, guys. Cavalry, okay? Do the charge from the end of Lord of the Rings, the Two Towers, okay? Be Gandalf at the front. But when we're in this type of situation, be a little bit more frugal. Be a little bit more stingy. Hide behind your walls, right? Hide in your white tower, refuse to come out. But when you do ride out, make sure you're going to plow straight through Mordor. And that's exactly what BC and the Bros do to take this series 2-0. And of course, if you enjoyed what you saw here, guys, make sure you are subscribing on the YouTube side. I'm now talking to YouTube people. The Twitch people, they're here as well, so you can go across and watch live if you want to at any point. So make sure you follow me on the social medias because we've got more games coming. We're not done by a mile here. This is just a round of 64. And these go from best of 3s to best of 5, so you want to stay tuned.